No doubts, absolutely no doubts in their mind. Allah says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أُولَئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. Allah says, only the believers, innama, that is only the believers are those who believe in Allah and His Rasul and have since never doubted. ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا, have since never doubted. No doubts in their mind. How do we know? No doubts in their minds. وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ وَأَنفُسِهِمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, but have striven with their wealth and their persons in the cause of Allah. Allah says, أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. These are the sincere ones. You know, sometimes you see a businessman, he spends more time, perhaps most of his time trying to establish his business. He puts all efforts there. He often, we see, ignores his own family. We see often politicians trying to establish their career, political career, and they are so busy, they have devoted with all their lives and their persons and their wealth to advance their career, establish their political career. Allah says, believers are those who strive with might and main with their resources and their lives in the cause of Allah Ta'ala. Allah says, they are the sincere ones. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ. These are the true believers. These are the sincere ones. Because believers will be ever ready to make extreme sacrifices in the cause of Allah, spend all of their money or most of their money in the path of Allah, recite the book of Allah, spend money in the path of Allah, time in the path of Allah, because they are absolutely sure of the guaranteed return of the hereafter. But those who are not willing to do such good deeds, that is, spend time in the path of Allah, money in the path of Allah, recite the book of Allah, study the book of Allah, those who do not who are not willing to do such good deeds, are providing open proof against themselves, open evidence against themselves to Allah Ta'ala that they have rejected Allah's message. And in fact, this is why Allah Subhanahu Wa Ta'ala questions our belief. Allah questions our belief. Allah says in another verse, قُلْ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ. See, have you seen it coming from Allah? Allah says, have you seen it coming from Allah? If you have seen it coming from Allah, ثُمَّ كَفَرْتُمْ بِهِ. How come you have rejected it? How come you have rejected it? I'm giving an example. Suppose we have got 4 business projects. Let's say project A gives 10% return, project B gives 25% return, project C gives 12%, and project D gives, let's say, 8%. So we invest in project B, or at least do not consider other projects as worthy as this one. And this is precisely the argument of Allah. This is precisely the argument of Allah. That if we had really believed that Allah's project had the highest return, then we would have invested in it. We have spent money in it, we have time in it, would have invested in Allah's project. But because we have, I'm giving another simpler example. Say I've got a piece of gold in my hand. It costs $100,000. But I tell you, look, I'll offer you for $5,000. If you really believe that this is pure gold, you will grab it. You will grab it, man. It costs $100,000. Now it's being offered for $5,000. You will grab it. But if you have doubts in your mind, oh no, this is not pure gold. If you have doubts in your mind, then you will not buy it. You will not invest in it. And that's precisely the argument of Allah. That's precisely the argument of Allah. If we had really believed Allah's project had the highest return, how come we have rejected it? ثُمَّ كَفَرْتُمْ بِهِ. How come we have rejected it? Allah says about the believers. Believers are those who spend freely in the path of Allah. Allah says, هَا أَنْتُمْ هَؤُلَاءِ تُدْعَوْنَ لِتُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ فَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يَبْخَلْ وَمَنْ يَبْخَلْ فَإِنَّمَا يَبْخَلُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. Allah says, you are those, that is believers, you are those who have been invited to spend in the cause of Allah. أَنْتُمْ هَؤُلَاءِ تُدْعُونَ لِتُنْفِقُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. But فَمِنْكُمْ مَنْ يَبْخَلُ. But among you are such that are niggardly. وَمَنْ يَبْخَلْ فَإِنَّمَا يَبْخَلُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. But any who are niggardly at the expense of their own soul. Now many of us find it very easy to spend in fun parties, lavish wedding parties, dinner parties, birthday parties, anniversary parties. We find it very easy. But we find it very difficult to spend money in the path of Allah, such as to build masjid, such as to buy Islamic books and materials. Then we expect gifts from others. We don't want to have money for Islamic books and materials. We find very difficult to spend in the path of Allah, that is to propagate the message of Allah, to invite people to the guidance of Allah. We find it very difficult to help the orphan and the needy and the poor. We are too busy decorating our houses and our gardens and fulfilling all our baser desires. We think we are gaining, but we are actually, Allah says, we are losing at the expense of our own soul. Allah says, وَمَنْ يَبْخَلْ فَإِنَّمَا يَبْخَلُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. Any who are niggardly, that is niggardly in the path of Allah, are losing at the expense of their own soul. وَمَنْ يَبْخَلْ فَإِنَّمَا يَبْخَلُ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. Any who are niggardly at the expense of their own soul. Allah says about the believers. Believers are those who avoid vain talk. What is vain talk? People sit down in lounge rooms, drawing rooms, they wedding parties, celebration parties. They get absorbed in prolonged discussions, gossips. Sometimes well beyond midnights. They spend time in vain funs and humor. Sometimes well beyond midnights, talking about their wealth, their social status, their financial status, their business status, their achievements, their children's achievements. Beauty of their houses. People glorify themselves. Instead of glorifying Allah, they glorify themselves. Allah says in the Quran, in every breast there is a quest for self-glory. They want to promote themselves. People sit down, they talk amongst themselves. The essence of that conversation or discussion is simply they're trying to promote themselves. It's self-glorification. In most cases, Allah Ta'ala commands believers to avoid vain talk. What should the believers do when they hear vain talk? Allah says, وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا اللَّغْوَ عَارَضُوا عَنْهُ وَقَالُوا لَنَا أَعْمَالُنَا وَلَكُمْ أَعْمَالُكُمْ سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ لَا نَبْتَغِي الْجَاهِلِينَ. Allah says, وَإِذَا سَمِعُوا اللَّغْوَ. And when they hear vain talk, what do? عَارَضُوا عَنْهُ. They turn away from them, saying, وَقَالُوا لَنَا أَعْمَالُنَا وَلَكُمْ أَعْمَالُكُمْ. Saying, our deeds are for us, your deeds are for you. سَلَامٌ عَلَيْكُمْ. Peace be unto you. لَا نَبْتَغِي الْجَاهِلِينَ. We seek not the ignorant. We seek not the ignorant. They turn away from the ignorant. Allah Ta'ala commands believers to avoid gossip parties, fun parties, where Allah Ta'ala's revelations are treated as jokes. Allah says, فَأَعْرِضْ. Shun away from whom? أَمَّنْ تَوَلَّى عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا. ذِكْرِنَا. Shun away from those who turn away from our message, dhikrina. If you mention al-dhikr, many people in this part of the world understand the movement of the head in particular posture. Allah Ta'ala calls al-Quran al-dhikr. It is a remembrance. Allah Ta'ala calls al-Quran the burhan, the evidence. Allah Ta'ala calls al-Quran al-Furqan, the criterion. Allah Ta'ala calls al-Quran the shifa. It's a shifa, it's a healing for the believers, the healing for the believers. Ar-Rahmah is a mercy. That is mercy for the believers. Anyway, Quran has many names.